Myanmar. This golden land is dwelling to its golden era. Myanmar is evolving politically, socially, and economically. Myanmar is emerging as a prosperous nation. The country possesses abundant natural resources, a strategic location of the crossroads of Asia, a young population, and a sizable market with wide-ranging investment opportunities. As much as 90% of the Burmese population practice Buddhism, making it its main religion in Myanmar. Half of the Myanmar's economic output, notably all large industrial enterprises, domestic wholesale trade, and nearly all the retail trade. Historically, Myanmar has become the focal point of the export trade from the 17th to 18th, because Burma was already the main trade route between the India and China. Today, much of the population is engaged directly in agricultural, fishing pursuits. Those who are employed in other sectors of the economy, such as transporting, processing, marketing, and exporting agricultural goods. Myanmar's long-term vision is to achieve inclusive and sustainable economic growth with national reconciliation. Success in the initial set of reforms, some challenges remain in both economic management and the pace of the process. A great example of these challenges is the COVID-19 pandemic. The first wave of COVID-19 March to early August, Myanmar only recorded 360 cases and 6 deaths. However, in the second wave, they were overwhelmed with 76,414 cases and 1,695 deaths.
Myanmar has abundant energy resources, particularly hydropower and natural gas. However, the country's energy sector has been underdeveloped due to global isolation and lack of financial and technical capacity. Compared to other ASEAN countries, the contribution of Myanmar's banking sector to the economy is limited. Myanmar's banking asset to GDP ratio of 49% is the lowest among ASEAN peers. However, starting from a very low base, Myanmar's banking sector is one of the fastest growing in the region, a fact highlighted by an asset growth rate of 18%. People often think of Myanmar when anyone mentions frontier markets in Asia. This Southeast Asian country is indeed a perfect example of the region's rise as a whole. Meanwhile, investing in Myanmar's property market could soon offer healthy returns. The media have exemplified Myanmar's story of political and economic reform during the past decade. Tourism in Myanmar has gone through a major transformation since the country opened its doors to the rest of the world with the arrival of democratization in 2011. Although the number of foreign tourists visiting Myanmar is growing, it is still the smallest amongst the least developed of the ASEAN countries. Myanmar is blessed with a large numbers of tourist attractions, and hence there is great potential growth for the tourist industry. It is not difficult to see the possibilities of future growth for the Myanmar tourist industry. All that is needed is to improve both hard and soft infrastructure, making it more convenient and comfortable to access existing tourist attractions, which can be utilized in encouraging further growth in tourism. Given the key role of foreign direct investment in developing and diversifying Myanmar's economy from one based largely on agriculture and natural resources and one oriented more towards manufacturing and services, as well as in reintegrating Myanmar into the world economy, attracting foreign direct investment is a very important objective of government policy.
In Myanmar's international trade agreements, the government's decision in the early 1960s to limit foreign trade reversed the export orientation of the British colonial period. However, the subsequent relaxation of trade restrictions, notably the legalization of trade with China and Thailand in the late 20th century, allowed trade again to become a significant component of the national economy. Natural gas is Myanmar's primary export, followed by pulses, teak, minerals, and gems. Its principal imports include machinery and equipment, industrial raw materials, and consumer goods, largely because of sanctions imposed by United States and the members of the European Union in the late 20th century. Myanmar's Asian neighbors, including Thailand, Singapore, China, South Korea, India, and Japan, became its chief trading partners. In 2012, the EU suspended its economic sanctions before lifting them altogether the following year. After the return of the civilian rule, on March 2016, the United States ended its sanction programs. In Myanmar's workforce, a large youth population is frequently cited as one of Myanmar's major strengths. The country may benefit from a demographic dividend with a large share of the population engaged in productive work and supporting a smaller share of older and non-working people. While its demographic profile is favorable, the country suffers from a number of key deficits in its labor structure. A large share of workers is underemployed and thus are not able to contribute their full energy to economic output. Moreover, the workforce is relatively undereducated and low-skilled. And finally, the creation of an organized workforce is still in its infancy, with most workers engaged in various types of informal work and with a trade union movement that is only recently reviving after years of suppression. Labor disruptions due to strikes may pose a concern for foreigners seeking to invest and take advantage of low wage. Underemployment is a serious problem and is defined as working less than 44 hours per week. Embarrassment over the depressed economy in Myanmar, a nation predicted early after independence to become the richest state in Southeast Asia, only to become in December 1987 to be one of the world's least developed nations. The problems are compounded in some minority areas that remain insecure and under military hold. In eastern Myanmar alone, 500,000 people are internal refugees. Land grabbing conducted by the military and the state and given to state entities or to businessmen to close to the regime is endemic. Corruption undermines business transactions and legal decisions. Can foreign aid ameliorate these problems? Since 2011, there have been two major catalysts for reforms in the government of Myanmar's management of public finances. The first is the creation of the parliament and the establishment of the PAC or PAC. The second is the separation of state and the regional budgets from the union. Following independence from the British colonial rule in 1948, the primary political question was how the newly created Union of Burma would integrate and govern the various different ethnic, deepening democracy in Myanmar groups. Government spending on the military was consistently higher than spending on health and education combined, with Myanmar being the only country in Southeast Asia where this was the case. The government of Myanmar consistently ran budget deficits, with the vast majority of these deficits financed by the government-controlled central bank printing money, with the inevitable result of high inflation. And last but not the least, under a Land Reformation Act, millions of farmers across Myanmar could be forced from their lands they have tilled for generations. Under Myanmar's Vacant, Fallow and Virgin Lands Management Act or VFV, which was introduced in 2012, ethnicities of ownership was not officially documented. This is a common situation among Myanmar's 134 ethnic minorities, who constitute a third of the country's population of 51 million. Their land was considered vacant by the authorities. In effect, anyone could claim it. For example, Chinese businesses have taken over banana plantation for mass export in Kachin, and in Rakhine State, land has been taken over to build oil and gas pipelines because the customary land rights of the ethnic tribes in Myanmar have not been recognized under the VFV law. It means that the farmers don't officially own the land and businesses have literally been taking it by force. What has happened to Myanmar's coup d'etat and why? Mass protests have been taking place across Myanmar since the military seized control on the 1st of February. Elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi and members of her National League of Democracy or NLD party are among those detained. Hundreds of people, including children, have been killed. The military is now back in charge and has now declared a year-long state of emergency. It seized control on the February 1st, following a general election of Miss Sukin, NLD party won by a landslide. The armed forces had backed the opposition, who were demanding a rerun of the vote, claiming widespread fraud. The election commission said there was no evidence to support these claims. The coup took place as a new session of parliament was set to open. Ms. Suki has been held at a known location since the coup. She is facing various charges, including violating the country's Official Secrets Act, possessing illegal walkie-talkies, and publishing information that may cause fear or alarm. NLD MPs who managed to escape arrest form a new group in hiding. Their leader has urged protesters to defend themselves against the crackdown. Is Aung San Suu Kyi. Aung San Suu Kyi became world famous in the 1990s for campaigning to restore democracy. She spent nearly 15 years in detention between 1989 and 2010 after organizing rallies calling for democratic reform and free elections. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 while under house arrest. In 2015, she led the NLD to victory in Myanmar's first openly contested election in 25 years, which is also called as Myanmar's democracy icon who fell from grace. Ms. Suu Kyi's international reputation has suffered greatly as a result of Myanmar's treatment of the Rohingya minority. Myanmar considers them illegal immigrants and denies them citizenship. Over decades, many have fled to escape persecution. Thousands of Rohingya were killed and more than 700,000 fled to Bangladesh following an army crackdown in 2017. Ms. Suu Kyi appeared before the International Court of Justice in 2019 where she denied allegations that the military had committed genocide. Who is in charge now? The person in charge in Myanmar is the military commander-in-chief Min Aung Hlaing has taken power. He has long wielded significant political influence, successfully maintaining the power of the Tatmadaw or the Myanmar's military even as the country moved towards democracy. He has received international condemnation and sanctions for his alleged role in the military attacks on ethnic minorities. In his first public comments after the coup, General Lang sought to justify the takeover. He said that the military was on the side of the people and would form a true and disciplined democracy. The military says it will hold a free and fair election once the state of emergency is over. The protests over the coup have been the largest since the so-called Saffron Revolution in 2017 when thousands of monks rose up against the military regime. Protesters include teachers, lawyers, students, bank officers, and government workers. The military has imposed restrictions, including curfews and limits to gatherings. Security forces have also used water cannons, rubber bullets, and live ammunition to try to disperse protesters. On 27th of March, in the deadliest day since the coup, more than 100 people were killed. Myanmar is back in the headlines because of scenes like these. The country is in turmoil after the military swept away the government the people voted for. Aung San Suu Kyi, the democracy icon, has been removed from power. So, how did we get here? Myanmar used to be known as Burma and was a British colony until 1948. But from 1962, it was largely ruled by military junta, which crushed any opposition. At least 3,000 people were killed in the pro-democracy movement in 1988, and dozens more were killed in 2007 Saffron Revolution, led by monks. Aung San Suu Kyi rose to prominence as one of the strongest voices of peaceful resistance. As a result, she spent years in and out of house arrest. Myanmar, meanwhile, became a pariah state, suffering under international pressure. But in 2010, as the military began loosening its grip on power, Aung San Suu Kyi was finally released. 5 years later, her party stormed to victory in the country's first democratic election in decades. But she saw her popularity plunged overseas as she refused to stand up for Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim minority. Her supporters said she was just trying to appease the military. After all, behind the scenes it still held enormous power. At home, she was still loved by the majority Buddhist population, and in 2020, her party won re-election by a landslide, almost wiping out the pro-military opposition. The army immediately began to allege voter fraud without offering any proof. Fears grew that the government might be overthrown once again. And then, on the 1st of February, the people of Myanmar woke up to a coup unfolding. Aung San Suu Kyi and other civilian leaders had been arrested. MPs had been rounded up and communication blocked. The military announced a year-long state of emergency, promising new elections. But the people, scared of returning to the dark days of junta, refused to be silenced. Slowly, at first, and then coming out into the streets, they demanded democracy be restored. No one knows how this will end, or even why the military chose to act when it already had so much power. But everyone remembers the violence of the past.